Her ex threw wine on her for fun, unaware her husband was a millionaire CEO. At the grand charity gala in New York City, champagne flowed freely and laughter echoed through the crystal-lit ballroom. Lila Dawson stood near the edge of the crowd in an elegant emerald gown, her hair swept up, radiating quiet confidence. She was admiring the evening when her past came crashing back. Trent Collins, the ex-boyfriend who'd cruelly dumped her 3 years ago, spotted her from across the room. He was drunk, loud, surrounded by colleagues he was desperate to impress. His smug grin faded when he saw her, then returned even wider. He swaggered over, mocking her in front of everyone, assuming she was working the event as staff. When she calmly told him she was a guest, he laughed in her face. Then, without warning, he raised his wineglass and threw it. Crimson liquid splashed across her dress as gasps filled the ballroom. But before Lila could react, a deep, calm voice cut through the silence. "That's enough." Every head turned to see Ethan Hale, her husband, the billionaire CEO hosting the event, standing there with controlled fury in his eyes. What happened next would teach Trent Collins a lesson he'd never forget. Before I continue with this story, I want you to tell me where you're watching from and what time is it. And if this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss my upcoming story. To understand how Lila ended up at that gala, married to one of the most powerful men in New York, we need to go back 3 years. Back to when Lila was a completely different person, living a completely different life. 3 years earlier, Lila Dawson was 26 years old and working as a waitress at a busy downtown restaurant called the Sterling. It wasn't glamorous work. The hours were long, starting at lunch and often not ending until past midnight. Her feet ached constantly from standing on hard floors in cheap shoes she couldn't afford to replace. Her hands were perpetually dry from washing dishes when the kitchen got backed up. The pay was barely enough to cover her small studio apartment in a neighborhood that wasn't quite safe, but was all she could afford. But Lila had dreams that reached far beyond serving plates and refilling water glasses. She'd gone to community college for graphic design, graduating with honors despite working 30 hours a week to pay for classes. She had a natural eye for color and composition, a talent that her professors had praised repeatedly. But breaking into the design industry without connections or an expensive portfolio was nearly impossible. So she waitressed and saved every dollar she could, planning to eventually start her own small design business. She spent her rare days off taking online courses to improve her skills. She practiced logo designs and branding concepts on her ancient laptop that took 5 minutes to boot up. She built a modest portfolio of spec work, designing imaginary brands for imaginary companies, hoping that someday someone would pay her to do it for real. Lila was ambitious, hard-working, and kind to everyone she met, even the rude customers who snapped their fingers at her or complained that their medium-rare steak was too rare or not rare enough. Her co-workers liked her because she never complained and always helped cover shifts when someone was sick. Her regulars liked her because she remembered their usual orders and asked about their families. Her manager liked her because she showed up on time and never caused drama. But despite all her good qualities, Lila often felt invisible. She felt like just another waitress in a city full of them, another young woman with dreams that probably wouldn't come true. That changed the day Trent Collins walked into the Sterling. Trent was 29, a marketing executive at a mid-sized advertising firm. He was tall and handsome, with styled blonde hair and expensive suits that announced he'd made something of himself. He had an easy charm that made people like him immediately, a smile that seemed genuine, and a way of talking that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He started coming to the Sterling for lunch meetings with clients, always requesting a table in Lila's section. At first she thought it was coincidence. Then he started asking her about her day, making jokes that actually made her laugh, leaving generous tips with his business card tucked underneath. After the third time he left his card, Lila finally called him. They went to dinner at a nice restaurant that Lila had only walked past before, never imagining she'd eat inside. Trent was attentive and complimentary, asking about her life and her dreams. When she told him about her design aspirations, he didn't laugh or tell her it was unrealistic. Instead, he said, "You're too talented to be waiting tables, Lila. You deserve better than this." Those words were like oxygen to someone who'd been holding her breath for years. Someone saw her potential. Someone believed in her. Someone thought she deserved more. They started dating officially, and for 6 months, Lila thought she'd found something real. Trent would pick her up after her shifts, not caring that she smelled like French fries and was exhausted. He'd take her to movies and dinners and weekend trips to the beach. He'd talk about their future together, about the life they'd build, about how they were both ambitious people who understood what it took to succeed. He'd tell her she was beautiful when she wore her waitress uniform and hadn't had time to fix her hair. He'd kiss her forehead and say, "You work so hard, I admire that about you." Lila fell in love with him completely. She thought Trent was different from other men she'd dated. She thought he valued substance over superficial things. She thought he saw her for who she really was, not just what she did for a living, but she was wrong. The change happened gradually, so slowly that Lila almost didn't notice at first. About 8 months into their relationship, Trent got a major promotion at his firm. He was made senior vice president with a significant raise and a corner office on the 20th floor. Suddenly, he was attending more high-profile events, meeting with more important clients, moving in circles where appearances mattered a great deal. He started making comments about Lila's job that felt different from before. "Are you still waiting tables?" he'd ask, as if she could just quit without another source of income. "When are you going to start that design business?" he'd say, making it sound like she was procrastinating instead of saving money and building skills. "Maybe you should look for something more professional," he suggested, as if waitressing wasn't legitimate work. Lila tried to laugh it off at first, tried to remind him that she was working toward her goals, that these things took time. But the comments continued. Then came the night that changed everything. Trent invited Lila to a company event, a fancy cocktail party celebrating his promotion. She was excited, thinking this meant he wanted to integrate her into his professional life. She used a week's worth of tip money to buy a nice dress from a department store sale rack. She did her makeup carefully and wore her hair down the way Trent said he liked. She felt pretty and optimistic as they walked into the event together. But from the moment they arrived, Lila could feel Trent's discomfort. He introduced her to his colleagues with vague phrases like, "This is Lila," without mentioning their relationship. When people asked what she did, Trent would answer for her, saying something like she's between opportunities instead of letting her speak. When one of his co-workers' wives asked Lila directly about her career, Lila answered honestly that she was a waitress saving money to start a design business. The woman's expression shifted from friendly interest to thinly veiled judgment. "Oh," she'd said, "how nice." But her tone said the opposite. Trent had been standing nearby and overheard the exchange. His jaw had tightened, and he'd quickly steered Lila away to get drinks. The rest of the evening was torture. Trent kept her at the edges of conversations, never fully including her in his professional circle. He introduced her to fewer and fewer people as the night went on. When a senior partner's wife complimented Lila's dress and asked where she'd gotten it, Lila mentioned the department store, and the woman's smile had frozen. "How practical," she'd said before turning away. On the drive home, Trent was silent for a long time. Finally, Lila asked, "Did I do something wrong tonight?" Trent sighed heavily. "You didn't do anything wrong, Lila. You were just yourself." "What does that mean?" He pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned to look at her. "It means I'm at a different place in my career now. I'm meeting with CEOs and board members. I'm attending events where image matters, and I need someone who fits into that world." Lila felt cold dread spreading through her chest. "Are you saying I don't fit?" "I'm saying you're a waitress, Lila. You're sweet and kind and you work hard, but you don't understand the world I'm moving into. Tonight, when you told Rebecca you bought your dress at a department store sale, she literally raised her eyebrows at me. These people judge everything. They notice everything." "So you're embarrassed by me," Lila said, her voice barely above a whisper. Trent ran his hand through his hair in frustration. "I'm not embarrassed. I'm just being realistic. You and I are in different places. You're still trying to get started, and I've already made it. That gap is only going to get wider." "But I'm working toward my goals," Lila protested. "I'm building my skills. I'm saving money. I have a plan." "Plans are great, Lila. But plans don't change the fact that right now, tonight, you are out of place at that event. And I can't keep bringing you to these things if you're going to make me look bad." Each word was a knife. Lila stared at him. This man she'd loved, this man who'd claimed to admire her work ethic, and she saw him clearly for the first time. He'd never really valued her ambition. He'd liked the idea of dating a hard-working girl while he was still climbing the ladder himself. But now that he'd reached a higher rung, he wanted someone who was already standing at his level, someone who wore expensive clothes without mentioning where they'd bought them, someone who had a respectable career title to share at cocktail parties, someone who wouldn't embarrass him in front of people who mattered. "So what are you saying?" Lila asked, even though she already knew. Trent looked at her with something that might have been genuine regret, though it was hard to tell. "I'm saying this isn't working anymore. I care about you, Lila, I really do. But you'll never belong in my world. You're sweet and kind, and I hope you achieve your dreams someday. But I need to be with someone who's already there, someone who understands the life I'm building." "You're breaking up with me because I'm a waitress," Lila said flatly. "I'm breaking up with you because we want different things," Trent corrected, as if that made it better. "I want the same things you want," Lila said, hating how desperate she sounded. "Success, financial stability, a good life. I'm just starting from a different place than you, and that's the problem," Trent said gently, as if he were explaining something to a child. "The gap between where you are and where I am is too big. I'm sorry, Lila. I really am." He drove her home in silence. When they reached her building, he didn't get out of the car or walk her to her door like he usually did. He just looked at her with those sad eyes and said, "Take care of yourself, okay?" Lila got out of the car without another word. She walked up to her studio apartment, closed the door and collapsed on her bed. She cried for hours, great heaving sobs that left her exhausted and hollow. She cried because she'd lost someone she loved. She cried because she'd been rejected for something she couldn't immediately change. She cried because Trent had made her feel like she wasn't enough, like her hard work and ambition didn't matter, because she hadn't achieved success quickly enough. Most of all, she cried because part of her believed him. Part of her believed that she really didn't belong in his world, that she was just a waitress with unrealistic dreams, that she would always be too late, too poor, too unpolished to deserve someone successful. The next day, Lila called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the relationship, wondering what she could have done differently. Should she have lied about where she bought her dress? Should she have pretended to be something she wasn't? Should she have been embarrassed about honest work that paid her bills? By the third day, something shifted inside her. The grief began to transform into something else: anger, determination, a burning need to prove that Trent Collins was wrong about her. Lila got out of bed, took a shower, and looked at herself in the mirror. "You're going to show him," she said to her reflection. "You're going to build something so successful that he'll regret every word he said." She went back to work at the Sterling with renewed focus. Every shift became an opportunity to save more money. Every tip went into a dedicated savings account labeled Business Fund. She stopped spending money on anything unnecessary. She packed lunches instead of buying them. She walked instead of taking the subway when weather permitted. She found a cheaper apartment with lower rent and used the difference to buy better design software. In the evenings after her shifts, when her feet ached and she wanted nothing more than to collapse in bed, Lila worked on her design skills instead. She took free online courses from universities offering open courseware. She studied successful brands and analyzed what made their visual identity work. She redesigned logos for existing companies as practice, posting them on design forums where other professionals could critique her work. She built a real portfolio, not of imaginary companies, but of spec work for real brands that showed what she could do. She created a simple website showcasing her work. She printed business cards using a discount printing service. She reached out to small businesses in her neighborhood, offering to design their menus or logos for significantly reduced rates just to build her client list. Slowly, painfully slowly, Lila built something real. Her first paid client was a coffee shop that needed a new logo. They paid her $200, which seemed like a fortune for work she loved doing. Her second client was a bookstore that needed social media graphics. Then a yoga studio needed flyers. Then a local restaurant needed a menu redesign. Each project led to another through word of mouth. People liked working with Lila because she listened to what they needed and delivered quality work on time. She was professional, responsive, and talented. She charged fair rates and never missed deadlines. Within 6 months, Lila had enough regular clients that she could quit waitressing and focus on design full-time. It was terrifying to lose the steady income from the sterling, but it was also exhilarating. She was finally doing what she'd dreamed of doing. She was building something that was entirely hers. Within a year, she'd built a legitimate small design business with a growing client list and a reputation for excellent work. She raised her rates to match her experience and skill level. She rented a small office space that doubled as her apartment, a studio with good natural light and room for a proper desk and work area. She was making more money doing design work than she'd ever made waitressing. More importantly, she was proud of herself. She'd taken the heartbreak and humiliation of Trent's rejection and transformed it into fuel for her success. Every time she doubted herself, she remembered his words, "You'll never belong in my world." And she worked harder to prove him wrong. Not because she wanted him back, but because she wanted to prove to herself that her worth wasn't determined by someone else's limited vision of who she could be. 2 years after the breakup, Lila's business was thriving. She had steady clients, a growing portfolio, and a reputation in the local small business community as someone who could solve brand identity problems. That's when she got an email that would change everything. The email was from an assistant requesting design services for a new client. The client was launching a new division of their company and needed a complete brand identity package: logo, color scheme, typography, business cards, letterhead, website design. It was the kind of comprehensive project that could pay her bills for months. The email didn't mention the client's name, only that they'd been referred by one of Lila's previous clients who'd been very pleased with her work. Lila responded professionally, asking for more details about the project scope and timeline. A meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday at a downtown office building. Lila dressed carefully for the meeting, wearing professional clothes she'd gradually acquired as her business grew: a tailored blazer, a simple blouse, dark pants, and shoes that were both comfortable and polished. She brought her portfolio in a leather case she'd finally been able to afford. She arrived at the office building 15 minutes early and checked in with security, who directed her to the 23rd floor. The elevator opened onto a sleek reception area with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A receptionist smiled warmly and asked her to wait in a conference room. The conference room was impressive: a long table, comfortable chairs, a wall of windows, abstract art on the walls. Lila set up her portfolio and laptop, preparing to present her previous work and discuss the client's needs. She heard footsteps in the hallway, and then the conference room door opened. A man walked in and Lila's breath caught. He was probably in his early 30s, tall with dark hair and warm brown eyes. He wore a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up and dark pants, professional but not overly formal. But what struck Lila most wasn't his appearance. It was the way he smiled when he saw her, genuine and kind, with no trace of judgment or superiority. "You must be Lila Dawson," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Ethan Hale. Thank you for meeting with me." Lila shook his hand, noting his firm but not aggressive grip. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Hale. I'm excited to hear about your project." "Please, call me Ethan," he said, sitting down across from her. "Mr. Hale makes me feel like I should be wearing a tie." Lila smiled, feeling some of her nervousness ease. "Ethan it is." He pulled out a folder and opened it, showing her some preliminary notes about what his company needed. "So here's the situation," Ethan began. "My company is expanding into a new market sector, and we need a brand identity that feels fresh and approachable, but still professional. We've been operating in tech for years, but this new division focuses on accessibility solutions, making technology more usable for people with disabilities." Lila's interest was immediately piqued. That's a wonderful mission. It is, Ethan agreed, but we've struggled to communicate it visually. Everything we've tried feels either too corporate and cold or too informal and unprofessional. We need someone who can find that balance. Can I ask what your company is called? Lila asked, pulling out her notebook. Hale Enterprises, Ethan said casually. Lila's pen froze mid-air. Hale Enterprises. She'd heard that name before. Actually, everyone had heard that name before. Hale Enterprises was one of the largest technology companies in the country, worth billions, with offices in every major city and products used by millions of people worldwide. And Ethan Hale was sitting across from her in rolled-up shirt sleeves, talking to her like she was a peer instead of a small freelance designer working out of a studio apartment. Lila must have looked shocked because Ethan's expression shifted slightly. I should have mentioned that in the email, he said. My assistant sometimes forgets to include those details. Does that change anything? Lila swallowed hard. I'm just surprised. I didn't realize I was meeting with the CEO of Hale Enterprises. Does that make you uncomfortable? Ethan asked, and he sounded genuinely concerned. No, Lila said, forcing herself to be professional despite her racing heart. I want to make sure I can deliver what you need. This is a much bigger project than I usually take on. I've seen your portfolio, Ethan said, gesturing to the leather case she'd brought. May I? Lila nodded and slid the portfolio across the table. Ethan spent several minutes carefully reviewing her work, studying each project with genuine attention. He asked thoughtful questions about her design choices, about why she'd selected certain colors or fonts, about how she'd approached solving each client's specific problems. Lila found herself relaxing as she explained her process. Ethan wasn't trying to intimidate her or test her. He was genuinely interested in understanding how she worked. This is really impressive, Ethan said finally, closing the portfolio. You have an eye for what works. Everything feels intentional, not just decorative. Thank you, Lila said, feeling warmth spread through her chest at the sincere compliment. I want to be honest with you, Ethan continued. I could hire one of the big design firms that charge ridiculous amounts and produce work that's technically perfect but soulless. I've done that before and I hated the results. What I'm looking for is someone who cares about what they're creating, who understands that design isn't just about looking good, it's about communicating something meaningful. He leaned forward slightly, his brown eyes meeting hers. Your work tells me you understand that, so if you're willing to take on this project, I'd like to work with you. Lila felt like she might cry from the validation, but she kept her composure. I would be honored to work on this, she said. But I need to be upfront with you. I'm a one-person operation. I don't have a team. If you need something fast, I might not be able to deliver at the pace a larger firm could. I'd rather have quality than speed, Ethan said. And honestly, I prefer working with someone I can talk to directly, instead of going through layers of account managers and project coordinators. They spent the next hour discussing the project in detail. Ethan described his vision for the new division, what he hoped to accomplish, who the target audience was. Lila took extensive notes and asked clarifying questions. By the end of the meeting, she had a clear understanding of what he needed, and several ideas already forming in her mind. This is going to be great, Ethan said as they wrapped up. How long do you think you'll need for the initial concepts? 2 weeks, Lila suggested. I want to give this the attention it deserves. Perfect. Take 3 if you need it. I'd rather see your best work than have you rush. As Lila packed up her materials, Ethan walked her to the elevator. Can I ask you something? He said as they waited for the elevator to arrive. Of course. How did you get into design? You clearly have natural talent, but there's also a lot of skill and training in your work. Lila hesitated, not sure how much to share. But something about Ethan's genuine curiosity made her want to be honest. I went to community college while working full-time as a waitress, she said. It took me longer than most people to finish because I could only afford to take a few classes each semester. After I graduated, I built my business slowly, one small client at a time. Ethan's expression showed nothing but respect. That takes incredible determination. It took a lot of late nights and ramen dinners, Lila said with a slight smile. The best success stories usually do, Ethan replied. The elevator arrived, and Lila stepped inside. I'll send over the contract and project details by tomorrow, Ethan said. Sounds good. Thank you again for this opportunity. Thank you for being willing to take it on, Ethan said. I have a feeling this is going to be the start of something great. The elevator doors closed, and Lila rode down to the lobby in a daze. She'd just landed the biggest client of her career. More than that, she'd been treated with genuine respect by someone who had every reason to dismiss her as too small or inexperienced. Over the next 3 weeks, Lila threw herself into the project. She researched accessibility technology, studied competitor brands, and created multiple design concepts. She worked late into the night, perfecting every detail. When she finally presented her initial concepts to Ethan, she'd created 3 distinct brand identities, each with a complete visual language. Ethan studied them carefully, asking thoughtful questions about each approach. This one, he said, pointing to the second concept. This is exactly what I was imagining but couldn't articulate. How did you know? I listened to what you said about wanting to feel approachable but professional, Lila explained. This design uses softer colors and rounded shapes to feel welcoming, but the typography is clean and modern to maintain credibility. It's perfect, Ethan said, genuine admiration in his voice. You're incredibly talented, Lila. The project continued over the following months. Lila would create designs, Ethan would provide feedback, and they'd refine the work together. But something else was developing alongside the professional relationship. Their meetings started lasting longer as they discussed not just design, but other topics. Ethan would ask about Lila's other projects, and she'd ask about the challenges of running a major company. They discovered shared interests in books and hiking and terrible reality TV shows they were both embarrassed to admit they watched. Ethan started scheduling meetings over lunch, claiming it was more efficient, but really just wanting to spend more time talking to her. Lila found herself looking forward to those meetings more than she probably should for a professional relationship. 6 months into the project, after a particularly long working session, Ethan asked Lila if she wanted to grab dinner. Not as a client meeting, he clarified quickly, as me asking you to have dinner with me, if you're interested. No pressure if you're not. Lila felt her heart skip. Are you asking me on a date? I am, Ethan said. I know it's probably not professional since we're working together, but I can't stop thinking about you, and I needed to know if you might feel the same way. Lila smiled. I'd love to have dinner with you. That dinner turned into weekly dinners, which turned into weekend hikes, which turned into late-night phone calls where they'd talk until 2 in the morning about everything and nothing. Ethan was different from anyone Lila had ever dated. He never tried to change her or mold her into something else. He was genuinely interested in her opinions and her dreams. He asked about her day and actually listened to the answer. He respected her work and her independence. When she told him about Trent, about the cruel breakup, and the words that had haunted her, Ethan's response was immediate and fierce. He was an idiot, Ethan said flatly. Anyone who judges someone's worth based on their job title is too shallow to deserve real love anyway. But he was right in some ways, Lila said quietly. I didn't fit into his world. No, Ethan corrected firmly. You didn't fit into his narrow, superficial world. But that's not a flaw in you. That's a flaw in him and the world he chose to inhabit. He took her hands in his. Lila, you're brilliant and talented and kind. You built a successful business from nothing through sheer determination and hard work. Any world that doesn't see your value isn't worth belonging to. Those words healed something in Lila that she hadn't realized was still broken. They dated for 8 months before Ethan proposed. It wasn't a grand public gesture with photographers and a crowd. It was just the two of them on a quiet Saturday morning, making breakfast in Ethan's kitchen. Lila was scrambling eggs when Ethan suddenly said, "Marry me." She turned around, spatula still in hand, thinking she'd misheard. What? Ethan pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Marry me, he repeated. I love you. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and make terrible breakfast together and argue about whether we're watching your reality shows or my documentaries." Lila set down the spatula, her hands shaking. "Are you sure?" she asked. "I mean, you're a CEO. You could marry someone from your world, someone who—" "Stop," Ethan interrupted gently. "You are from my world. You're from the world of people who work hard and care about what they do and treat other people with kindness. That's the only world that matters to me." He opened the box, revealing a simple but beautiful diamond ring. "So what do you say? Will you marry me?" Lila didn't hesitate. "Yes." They married 3 months later in a small ceremony with just close friends and family. No big society wedding with hundreds of guests Lila didn't know. No photographers or magazine deals. Just two people who loved each other, making a commitment in front of the people who mattered most. Lila kept her design business, and Ethan continued running his company. They built a life that balanced both their careers, supporting each other's ambitions while making time for the relationship that mattered most. For 3 years, they were happy. Lila's business continued to grow, with Ethan's division project becoming a centerpiece of her portfolio that led to more corporate clients. Ethan's company thrived, with the accessibility division becoming one of their most successful ventures. They bought a house together, adopted a rescue dog named Cooper, and talked about starting a family someday. Lila rarely thought about Trent anymore. That painful chapter of her life had faded into just a story she occasionally told about what had motivated her to build her business. She'd moved on completely. She was happy in a way she'd never been with Trent, because Ethan loved her exactly as she was. Then came the charity gala. Hale Enterprises was hosting a fundraising event for a youth technology program that provided computers and training to underserved communities. It was being held at the Grand Plaza Hotel, one of the most luxurious venues in New York City. The event had been in planning for months, with Ethan deeply involved in every detail because the cause mattered to him personally. Lila had helped design the event materials, invitations, programs, banners, and was attending as Ethan's wife and as one of the event organizers. She wore an emerald green gown that she'd bought specifically for the occasion, simple but elegant, with her dark hair swept up in a sophisticated style. When she looked at herself in the mirror before leaving home, she barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked confident, polished, successful, nothing like the insecure waitress Trent had dumped 3 years ago. "You look stunning," Ethan said, coming up behind her and kissing her shoulder. "You clean up pretty well yourself," Lila replied, adjusting his bow tie. They arrived at the gala together, and Lila felt a thrill walking into the ballroom on Ethan's arm. The space was transformed into an elegant wonderland. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across tables draped in white linens. Arrangements of white roses and green hydrangeas adorned every surface. A string quartet played softly in one corner, while waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Lila recognized several faces from the business community, people she'd met through Ethan or worked with on various projects. Everyone was dressed in their finest, the women in designer gowns, the men in tailored tuxedos. "Ready?" Ethan asked, squeezing her hand. "Ready," Lila confirmed. They made their way through the crowd, Ethan stopping frequently to greet donors and board members. He always kept Lila close, introducing her as "my wife, Lila," with genuine pride in his voice. People were warm and complimentary, asking about her design work, admiring her dress, treating her like she belonged exactly where she was. Because she did belong. She'd earned her place here through talent and hard work. About an hour into the event, Ethan was pulled aside by one of his board members who needed to discuss something urgent about the evening's program. "I'll be right back," Ethan promised Lila. 10 minutes tops." "Take your time," Lila said. "I'll go admire the silent auction items." She wandered toward the auction tables, examining the various donated items and services. There were vacation packages, restaurant gift certificates, artwork from local artists, and technology packages from various companies. Lila was studying a photography session package when she heard a voice that made her blood run cold. "Well, well, if it isn't my ex." She turned slowly, and there he was, Trent Collins, He looked older, with lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 3 years ago. His blonde hair was thinner than she remembered. He was wearing an expensive tuxedo and holding a champagne glass, surrounded by 3 other men who looked like typical corporate executives. Lila's heart was pounding, but she kept her expression neutral. "Hello, Trent." "I didn't expect to see you here," Trent said, swaying slightly. He was drunk, Lila realized. Not fall-down drunk, but definitely past the point of good judgment. "It's a charity event," Lila said calmly. "Lots of people are here." "Yeah, but this is a pretty exclusive event," Trent said, gesturing around the ballroom. $500 a plate. Not exactly the kind of thing I'd expect you to be able to afford." His friends laughed and Lila felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I'm a guest," she said firmly. "A guest," Trent repeated, his tone mocking. "Right. So what? You're working the event, coordinating something. I heard you started some little design business." "I did," Lila confirmed, refusing to let him bait her. "That's cute," Trent said condescendingly. "Good for you, making something of yourself. But seriously, Lila, what are you doing here? This is a pretty high-class event for someone at your level." One of his friends leaned in and whispered something to Trent that made him smirk. "Oh, I get it," Trent said loudly enough that people nearby started to turn and look. "You're here with a client, right? Networking? Trying to drum up business from the rich people?" "No," Lila said, her voice tight. "I'm here as a guest." "Come on, Lila," Trent said, moving closer. "You don't need to pretend with me. I know you. I know where you come from. You don't belong at an event like this any more than you belonged at my company party 3 years ago." Lila felt like she was being transported back to that horrible night in Trent's car. The same condescension, the same judgment, the same implication that she wasn't good enough. But she wasn't the same woman she'd been 3 years ago. "Trent," Lila said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I don't need to justify my presence here to you or anyone else. Now, if you'll excuse me..." She turned to walk away, but Trent reached out and grabbed her arm. "Wait," he said. "I'm not trying to be mean, Lila. I'm just being honest. You're out of your depth here. These people, this world, it's not for people like you." "Let go of my arm," Lila said firmly. Trent released her, but he didn't step back. His friends were watching with interest, clearly enjoying the drama. "I'm just trying to save you from embarrassment," Trent continued. "Someone's going to ask what you do, and when you say you run a small design business, they're going to look down on you, just like Rebecca looked down on you at my company party. Remember that? Remember how she practically laughed when you told her where you bought your dress?" Each word was designed to hurt, to remind Lila of her place in Trent's narrow view of the world. "Some people don't change," Trent said, shaking his head. "You're still trying to fit into spaces where you don't belong." That's when something inside Lila shifted. She looked at Trent, really looked at him, and she realized something profound. He was smaller than she remembered, not physically but in every other way. He was a small man with a small mind who measured people's worth by superficial markers because he had nothing substantial to offer himself. "You're right about one thing," Lila said quietly. "Some people don't change. You're still the same shallow, insecure man who judges people based on their job title and where they buy their clothes. That must be exhausting, Trent. Always worrying about what other people think, always trying to impress people who probably don't even like you." Trent's face flushed red. "At least I have people to impress. You're here alone trying to..." "Actually," Lila interrupted, "I'm not alone." But before she could continue, Trent's frustration boiled over. Maybe it was the alcohol. Maybe it was the embarrassment of being called out. Maybe it was the realization that Lila wasn't the broken woman he'd left 3 years ago. Whatever the reason, Trent made a decision that would change everything. He raised his champagne glass, and with a cruel smirk, he said, "Guess some people never learn to stay in their place." Then he threw the entire glass of wine at Lila. Crimson liquid splashed across her emerald dress, soaking the fabric, dripping down toward the floor. The sound of gasps rippled through the nearby crowd. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Everyone within 20 feet was staring at Lila, standing there in her stained gown, wine dripping from her dress, humiliation washing over her in waves. Trent's friends were laughing, Other guests were whispering. Someone pulled out their phone to record. Lila stood frozen, fighting back tears, feeling like she was right back in Trent's car being told she didn't belong. And then she heard it, a voice that cut through the chaos like a blade. "That's enough." Every head in the ballroom turned toward the source of that voice. Ethan Hale was walking toward them, his expression absolutely cold, his eyes locked on Trent with barely controlled fury. The crowd parted as he approached, everyone sensing that something significant was about to happen. Ethan reached Lila first, his demeanor immediately shifting from cold fury to gentle concern. He removed his tuxedo jacket and draped it carefully over her shoulders, covering the wine-stained dress. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, touching her face with one hand. Lila nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Then Ethan turned to face Trent. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Who are you?" Trent asked, trying to sound confident but failing. Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and handed it to Trent. "You just disrespected my wife," Ethan said, his voice quiet but carrying clearly through the silent ballroom. "In my hotel, at my event." Trent's face went pale. "Your... what?" "My wife," Ethan repeated, his hand moving protectively to Lila's back. "The woman you just tried to humiliate." Trent stammered, his champagne-flushed confidence evaporating. I didn't know." "You didn't know she was married to someone important," Ethan interrupted, his voice still calm but edged with steel. "Or you didn't know you shouldn't throw wine on another human being regardless of who they're married to." The crowd was completely silent now. Every eye was fixed on the confrontation unfolding in the center of the ballroom. Several guests had their phones out, recording the scene. Trent's friends had taken several steps back, clearly wanting to distance themselves from whatever was about to happen. We were just... Trent fumbled for words. "It was a joke. We used to date. And I was just..." "A joke," Ethan repeated, his jaw clenching. "You thought publicly humiliating a woman you claimed to have once cared about was funny." He took a step closer to Trent, and despite being roughly the same height, Ethan's presence made him seem much larger. "Let me introduce myself properly," Ethan said, his voice carrying to every corner of the now silent ballroom. "My name is Ethan Hale. I'm the CEO of Hale Enterprises, and this hotel, this event, and most of the companies represented in this room have business relationships with my company." Trent's face went from pale to completely white. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The implications were clearly dawning on him. "The woman you just assaulted," Ethan continued, emphasizing the word assaulted, "is Lila Hale, my wife, and the lead designer who created the entire brand identity for our accessibility division, the division that's projected to generate over $200 million in revenue this year." A murmur rippled through the crowd. People were pulling out their phones, clearly Googling information, confirming what Ethan was saying. Lila felt Ethan's hand squeeze her shoulder gently, a silent check that she was okay. She managed a small nod, feeling stronger with him beside her. "But more importantly than any of that," Ethan said, his voice softening slightly but still carrying authority, "she's a brilliant, talented woman who built a successful business from nothing through sheer determination and hard work. The fact that you couldn't see her value 3 years ago says everything about you and nothing about her." Trent tried to speak. "Look, I didn't mean..." "I'm not finished," Ethan cut him off. "You came to this event as someone's guest. Whose?" Trent swallowed hard. "Richard Bennett, from Bennett Marketing. He's my boss." "Richard Bennett," Ethan repeated, pulling out his phone. "Excuse me for one moment." He stepped slightly away and made a call that everyone in the vicinity could hear. "Richard, it's Ethan Hale. I'm sorry to call during the event, but there's a situation I need to address with you. Could you come to the center of the ballroom, please? Thank you." Ethan ended the call and turned back to Trent, who looked like he might be sick. Within 30 seconds, a distinguished-looking man in his 50s appeared, looking confused and concerned. "Ethan, what's going on?" Richard Bennett asked. Ethan gestured toward Trent. "This is your employee, I believe. Trent Collins?" Richard glanced at Trent, his expression darkening. Yes, what did he do? He just threw a glass of wine on my wife, Ethan said simply, in front of approximately 200 witnesses. Richard's face went through several emotions in rapid succession: shock, horror, fury. He turned to Trent. Is this true? Trent opened his mouth, but no sound came out. It's true, one of Trent's former friends spoke up, clearly deciding to distance himself. We all saw it. He was drunk and being aggressive, and then he threw his wine at her. Richard closed his eyes briefly, as if praying for patience. When he opened them, he looked at Ethan. I am so deeply sorry. This behavior is completely unacceptable and does not represent our company's values in any way. He turned to Lila. Mrs. Hale, I apologize profusely for this man's actions. If there's anything I can do, there is, Ethan interjected, but we can discuss that privately. For now, I think it would be best if Mr. Collins left the premises. Absolutely, Richard agreed. He snapped his fingers at Trent. You out, now, and come to my office first thing Monday morning. Actually, don't bother. You're fired. Security will escort you out. Wait, Trent said desperately. You can't fire me. I've been with the company for 5 years. I've brought in major clients. You just assaulted the wife of one of our most important potential clients at a charity event, Richard said coldly, in front of dozens of witnesses and multiple cameras. You're done. Leave now before I have you arrested for assault. 2 security guards appeared, seemingly materializing from the crowd. They took positions on either side of Trent. This is insane, Trent protested, looking around wildly. It was just a joke. We used to date. She knows I didn't mean anything by it. I know exactly what you meant, Lila said, speaking for the first time since Ethan had arrived. Her voice was steady now, stronger. You meant to humiliate me the same way you tried to humiliate me 3 years ago when you told me I'd never belong in your world. You wanted to put me back in my place, to remind me that I was just a waitress who got lucky. But here's what you never understood, Trent. She took a step forward, Ethan's jacket still draped over her shoulders like armor. I didn't get lucky. I worked my ass off to build something real. I turned my heartbreak into motivation. I took every cruel word you said to me and used it as fuel to become someone better than I was. Not for you, not to prove anything to you, but for myself. Tears were streaming down her face now, but they weren't tears of humiliation anymore. They were tears of release, of finally saying everything she'd held inside for 3 years. You told me I'd never belong in your world, Lila continued, and you were right. I don't belong in a world where people are valued based on job titles and dress prices. I don't belong in a world where kindness is seen as weakness, and ambition is only respected if it comes with a certain pedigree. She gestured around the ballroom. But this world, the one where hard work and talent and integrity matter, I built my place here. I earned it, and no amount of wine you throw at me can take that away. The ballroom erupted in applause, not polite charity gala applause, but genuine, moved applause. Several women in the crowd were wiping their eyes. Even some of the men looked emotional. Trent stood there, flanked by security guards, looking smaller by the second. Get him out of here, Richard said to the guards. As Trent was escorted toward the exit, he tried one last time to salvage something. Lila, come on. We had something once, don't let this ruin. We had nothing, Lila said firmly. You had a girlfriend you were ashamed of. I had a learning experience about what I don't want in a partner. Now please leave. The security guards led Trent through the crowd, which parted silently. Every person he passed looked at him with a mixture of disgust and judgment. His career was over. His reputation was destroyed, and he'd done it all to himself. Once Trent was gone, the ballroom remained silent for another moment. Then Richard Bennett approached Lila again. Mrs. Hale, I cannot apologize enough for bringing that man to this event. I had no idea he was capable of such behavior. It's not your fault, Lila said graciously. You couldn't have known. Still, Richard insisted, if there's any way I can make this right. Actually, Ethan interjected, there might be. Bennett Marketing was on our shortlist for the advertising campaign for our accessibility division. I think Lila should be part of the pitch process, given that she designed the entire brand identity. What do you think, sweetheart? Lila looked at her husband, understanding what he was doing. He was giving her power in the situation, letting her decide how to handle Richard and his company. "I think that would be appropriate," Lila said. "And perhaps your company could benefit from some training on workplace behavior and professional conduct." "Absolutely," Richard agreed eagerly. "Whatever you think is appropriate. Again, I'm so sorry for tonight." He shook both their hands and retreated, already pulling out his phone to begin damage control. As he walked away, other guests began approaching Lila and Ethan. Several women came up to hug Lila, telling her how much her words had resonated with them. "I was a paralegal when I met my husband," one woman said. "His family looked down on me for years. What you said about building your place instead of fitting into someone else's idea of where you belong, that really spoke to me." "My daughter is in college studying art," another woman said. "Everyone tells her she'll never make money doing what she loves. I'm going to tell her your story. She needs to hear that success doesn't have to look like everyone else's version of success." Men approached too, several of them business owners who wanted Lila's card for potential design work. "Anyone who can build a business from nothing and handle a situation like that with such grace is someone I want to work with," one CEO said. The event organizer rushed over with a change of clothes, a simple black dress that one of the staff members kept in her locker for emergencies. "The bathroom is just through there," she said, pointing to a door near the back of the ballroom. "Take your time. We've got everything under control out here." Lila excused herself and went to change, needing a moment alone to process everything that had just happened. In the bathroom, she looked at herself in the mirror. Her makeup was smudged from crying. Her hair had come partially loose from its updo. Wine stained her beautiful emerald dress. But when she looked in her own eyes, she didn't see the humiliated woman Trent had tried to make her feel like. She saw someone strong, someone who'd spoken her truth in front of hundreds of people, someone who'd finally, fully released the pain Trent had caused 3 years ago. She cleaned up her makeup, fixed her hair, and changed into the borrowed black dress. When she returned to the ballroom, Ethan was waiting near the door. He looked at her with such love and pride that Lila felt her eyes fill with tears again. "You were incredible," he said softly, pulling her into his arms. "I'm so proud of you." "I couldn't have done it without you standing beside me," Lila replied. "You could have," Ethan corrected. "You're stronger than you know, but I'm glad I got to be there anyway." They returned to the event, and the rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations and congratulations. The incident with Trent became the talk of the gala, but not in the way he'd probably hoped. People weren't gossiping about Lila being humiliated. They were gossiping about Trent's spectacular self-destruction and Lila's powerful response. By the end of the night, Lila had collected 24 business cards from people who wanted to hire her for design work. She'd been invited to speak on 3 different panels about building a business as a woman entrepreneur. She'd received messages of support from people she'd never met, who'd seen videos of the confrontation already circulating on social media. As Ethan drove her home that night, Lila stared out the window at the city lights, processing everything. "You okay?" Ethan asked, glancing over at her. "I'm better than okay," Lila said. "I feel like I just closed a chapter that's been hanging open for 3 years." "You did," Ethan agreed. "You faced the man who tried to make you feel worthless, and you showed him exactly how wrong he was." "I showed myself," Lila corrected. "I think that's what mattered most. I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't that scared waitress anymore, that I'd become someone I could be proud of." Ethan reached over and took her hand. "I've always been proud of you. From the day we met when you were a freelance designer working out of a studio apartment, to tonight when you stood in front of hundreds of people and spoke your truth. You've always been worthy, Lila. The only thing that's changed is that you finally believe it." When they got home, Lila took a long shower, washing away the wine and the stress of the evening. She put on comfortable pajamas and found Ethan in the kitchen making tea. Cooper, their rescue dog, was dancing around his feet, excited by their return. "Tea and sympathy?" Lila asked, smiling. "Tea and celebration," Ethan corrected. "You were a warrior tonight." They sat on the couch with their tea, Cooper curled up between them. "Can I ask you something?" Lila said after a moment of comfortable silence. "Anything." Did you ever worry that what Trent said about me not belonging in your world might be true? Ethan set down his tea and turned to face her fully. Never, not once, not for a single second, he said firmly. Lila, you belong in any world you choose to enter because you bring value wherever you go. Your talent, your work ethic, your kindness, those things matter. They matter infinitely more than where you went to college or what your parents do for a living or what you wear to parties. He took her hands in his. The world Trent was talking about, the one where appearances and titles are all that matter. That's not my world. That's not a world I want to be part of. You and I built our own world, where what matters is how you treat people and whether you're doing work that means something. That's the world I want to live in. Lila felt fresh tears forming, but these were tears of happiness. How did I get so lucky to find you? She whispered. I'm the lucky one, Ethan replied, pulling her into his arms. You taught me what real strength looks like. You showed me that success isn't about how much money you make or how powerful your position is. It's about building something meaningful and treating people with respect along the way. They sat like that for a long time, just holding each other while Cooper snored contentedly between them. The next morning, Lila woke up to her phone buzzing constantly with notifications. She picked it up groggily and was shocked by what she saw. The story of what had happened at the gala had gone viral overnight. Multiple videos of the confrontation had been posted on social media, each one racking up millions of views. The headlines were everywhere. Billionaire CEO defends wife after public humiliation. Love wins over arrogance. Woman stands up to ex who tried to shame her at charity gala. CEO Ethan Hale ejects man who assaulted his wife at charity event. The speech that's making everyone cry. Designer Lila Hale responds to ex-boyfriend's cruelty. Lila scrolled through the comments, amazed by the response. Thousands of women were sharing their own stories of being made to feel inadequate by partners or employers or family members. Men were commenting about how Ethan's response was what real partnership looked like. Business publications were analyzing the incident from a professional conduct perspective. There were even think pieces being written about class, ambition, and what we value in society. You're famous, Ethan said, appearing in the bedroom doorway with coffee and toast. This is insane, Lila said, still scrolling. I didn't think anyone would care about this outside of the people who were there. People care because everyone's been in a situation where someone tried to make them feel small, Ethan said. Your response gave voice to something a lot of people feel but don't know how to express. Over the next few days, the attention continued to build. Lila received dozens of interview requests from news outlets, podcasts, and magazines. Her design business website crashed from all the traffic, and when her web host got it back online, she had hundreds of new client inquiries. 3 major corporations reached out wanting to hire her for brand redesign projects. A literary agent contacted her about writing a book about building a business from scratch. A university asked if she'd be interested in teaching a course on entrepreneurship. But the messages that meant the most to Lila were the personal ones. A young woman wrote, I'm a barista trying to start a photography business and everyone tells me I'm dreaming too big. Watching you stand up for yourself reminded me that other people's limitations don't have to be mine. A single mother wrote, I've been afraid to leave my emotionally abusive boyfriend because I thought I'd never find anyone who would accept me and my kids. Seeing your husband stand beside you showed me what real love looks like. A college student wrote, My parents want me to be a lawyer, but I want to be a chef. Everyone says I'm throwing away my potential. Your story helped me understand that success isn't one size fits all. Reading these messages, Lila realized that what had happened at the gala was about more than her and Trent. It was about everyone who'd ever been told they weren't good enough, everyone who'd been judged for their job or their background or their choices, everyone who'd built something meaningful despite being underestimated. As for Trent, the fallout was swift and severe. Richard Bennett's company released a statement condemning his behavior and confirming his termination. Several of Trent's professional contacts publicly distanced themselves from him. His social media accounts were flooded with criticism. His reputation in the marketing industry was effectively destroyed. Lila didn't take any pleasure in his downfall. She actually felt a strange kind of pity for him. He'd been so focused on superficial markers of success that he'd never built anything real. He'd never developed genuine relationships or created work he could be proud of. He'd just climbed a ladder that led nowhere meaningful. About a week after the gala, Lila received an unexpected email. It was from Trent. Her first instinct was to delete it without reading, but curiosity got the better of her. The email was brief. "Lila, I know I don't have the right to contact you, and you probably won't even read this. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, not because I lost my job or because everyone thinks I'm a terrible person, but because I was genuinely wrong about you. I was wrong 3 years ago when I told you that you'd never belong, and I was wrong at the gala when I tried to humiliate you. You've built something real through hard work and talent, and I couldn't see that because I was too focused on appearances and what other people thought. I've spent the past week thinking about my life and my choices, and I realize I don't have anything I'm actually proud of. I have credentials and contacts, but I don't have relationships or work that matters. You were right about me being small. I hope someday I can be bigger. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that you deserve everything good that's happened to you. Trent." Lila read the email 3 times. She showed it to Ethan, who read it silently, and then looked at her. "What do you think?" "I think he's probably being sincere," Lila said, "and I think he has a long road ahead of him to become the kind of person he wants to be." "Are you going to respond?" Lila thought about it for a moment, then shook her head. "No. I hope he figures things out and becomes a better person. But that's not my job. My job is to keep building my own life and my own success." She deleted the email and closed her laptop. That night, Ethan and Lila attended a much smaller, more intimate gathering, dinner with Lila's parents, who'd driven into the city to see them. Lila's mother couldn't stop hugging her. "We saw the videos. We're so proud of you, sweetheart." "Your speech was incredible," her father added. "You stood up there in front of all those people and spoke your truth. That takes real courage." Over dinner, Lila told them the full story, not just what had happened at the gala, but everything that had led to that moment. She told them about the painful breakup with Trent and how it had motivated her to build her business. She told them about meeting Ethan and falling in love with someone who saw her value. She told them about the years of work and determination it had taken to become successful. "You know what I'm most proud of?" Lila's mother said, tears in her eyes. "It's not that you married a CEO or that you became successful, though those things are wonderful. I'm proud that you never let anyone define your worth for you. When Trent tried to make you small, you made yourself bigger. That's real strength." Later, as Ethan and Lila were getting ready for bed, Lila found herself reflecting on everything that had happened. A week ago, she'd been anxious about attending a gala, worried about what people might think of her. Now, she was fielding job offers and interview requests and messages from people around the world who'd been inspired by her story. But more than any of that, she felt free. Free from the weight of Trent's judgment. Free from the fear that she wasn't good enough. Free to build the life she wanted, without worrying about fitting into someone else's narrow definition of success. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "I'm thinking that 3 years ago when Trent broke up with me, I thought my life was falling apart," Lila said. "But actually, that was the moment everything started falling into place. His rejection pushed me to build something I'm proud of. It led me to you. It made me into someone stronger than I ever would have been if he'd stayed." "Sometimes the worst things that happen to us end up being the best things," Ethan agreed. "I'm glad he rejected me," Lila said, turning to face Ethan, "because if he hadn't, I never would have found you. I never would have built my business. I never would have learned that I'm enough exactly as I am." Ethan kissed her forehead. "You were always enough. You just needed to see it for yourself." 6 months later, Lila stood on a stage at a women's entrepreneurship conference, looking out at an audience of 2,000 aspiring business owners. She'd been invited to give the keynote speech about building a successful business from nothing. As she looked out at all those hopeful faces, Lila thought about her journey, from waitress to designer, from rejected girlfriend to beloved wife. From someone who felt worthless to someone who knew her value. "I want to tell you about the best thing that ever happened to me," Lila began. "It was the day someone I loved told me I'd never belong in his world." The audience leaned forward, captivated. Lila told them the whole story, not sugarcoating the pain or the struggle, but also not dwelling on victimhood. She told them about turning heartbreak into motivation, about building something brick by brick through determination and hard work, about finding someone who valued substance over superficiality, about facing her worst fear at that gala and discovering she was stronger than she'd known. "The person who rejected me did me the biggest favor of my life," Lila said, "not because his rejection motivated me, though it did, but because his rejection taught me that other people's opinions about my worth are irrelevant. The only opinion that matters is my own." She paused, looking out at the audience. "Some of you are going to face rejection. Some of you already have. People are going to tell you that your dreams are unrealistic, that you're not qualified, that you don't belong in their world. And I want you to remember something. They're right." The audience looked confused, and Lila smiled. "You don't belong in their world, because their world is small and limited and defined by superficial markers that don't actually mean anything. You don't want to belong there. What you want is to build your own world, one where hard work matters, where talent is recognized, where kindness is valued, where success is measured by impact rather than appearances." The applause started then, building until the entire audience was on their feet. Lila finished her speech, answered questions, and spent the next hour talking to women who wanted to share their own stories of overcoming rejection and building something meaningful. As she finally left the conference center that evening, exhausted but energized, her phone rang. It was Ethan. "How'd it go?" he asked. "It was incredible," Lila said. "I think I might have helped some people today." "You help people every day just by being who you are," Ethan replied. "I'm proud of you. Now come home." Cooper and I made dinner, and I use the term made loosely since it mostly involved ordering from the Thai place you like. Lila laughed. "I'm on my way." As she walked to her car, Lila thought about how different her life was from what she'd imagined 3 years ago. She'd thought marrying Trent would be her happy ending, but his rejection had actually been her beginning. The beginning of building something real, the beginning of loving herself, the beginning of finding someone who loved her exactly as she was. The woman Trent had once dismissed as beneath him had become everything he would never be: successful, loved, respected, and most importantly, genuinely happy. Not because of revenge or proving him wrong, but because she'd built a life based on her own values, her own vision, her own definition of success. And that, Lila realized, as she drove home to her husband and her dog, and the life they'd built together was the best victory of all. If this story touched your heart, I want to hear from you right now. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. Have you ever had someone reject you or tell you that you weren't good enough? Have you ever been underestimated because of your job or your background? Have you ever had to prove to yourself, not to anyone else but to yourself, that you were worthy and capable? I read every single comment and I want to know your story, because stories like Lila's, stories about overcoming judgment and building success on your own terms, they matter. They remind us that other people's limitations don't have to be ours. They remind us that rejection is often redirection. They remind us that the right person will see our value when the wrong person was blind to it. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, please do that right now. Hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell so you never miss a story that will inspire you and remind you of your own strength. Like this video if Lila's journey resonated with you. Share it with someone who needs to hear that they're worthy exactly as they are. Because everyone deserves to know that their worth isn't measured by someone else's narrow standards. Everyone deserves to know that hard work and talent and character matter more than superficial appearances. Everyone deserves to build their own definition of success. Thank you so much for watching Lila and Ethan's story. Thank you for letting their journey into your heart. Thank you for believing that good people can overcome cruelty and build beautiful lives. I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourself. Know your worth, build your own world, and never let anyone make you feel small. You are enough exactly as you are. Until next time.